Good morning, everyone. So, in today's class, we will be discussing about threats to humanity. You can just make this as a heading, threats to humanity. So, in that first, let us try to classify the threats. After classification, we will be discussing a bit about the non-traditional threats too. In the last class, we mentioned that COVID-19, a non-traditional security threat, but we didn't discuss that. So by linking that, we will be taking up to the present, the nuclear challenge. So before having an idea about these nuclear threats and COVID-19 as a challenge, so let us try to classify the threats. So as we all know, threats can be broadly classified as two types. You can just make this as classification of threats. These are of two types. What are they? Traditional threats, non-traditional threats. Traditional and non-traditional. So what are the traditional threats and what are the non-traditional threats? What is the nature of the traditional threat and what is the nature of the non-traditional threat? So I won't be discussing too much about traditional, non-traditional and all those things, because again that will be going into too much about internal security. So I will be discussing a brief about traditional and non-traditional, then we'll be coming to the specific topic. Then you can understand this, either it can be a nuclear challenge or the COVID-19 challenge or any kind of threats being faced by the humanity in a better manner. Okay, then first come to the traditional threats. What are these traditional threats? In general, until in the recent past, we started perceiving that there is a different way of understanding the threat perception to humanity. Traditionally, we thought threats means a threat to the country's sovereignty. That's the reason, to protect the country's sovereignty, we used to have the armed forces, army, the defense forces. That's the reason every country will be having a defense ministry under which we used to have the defense forces. So traditionally, when a country says like we are facing a threat means here what? Threat to the country's sovereignty. So how the country can be saved from these threats? By strengthening its armed forces. By strengthening our armed forces, we will be protecting the country from the enemies. So this is the kind of our understanding. So that's why every time what we have to do, strengthen your army, strengthen your military forces. And because if there is a land threat, strengthen your army. If there is an air threat, strengthen your air force. If there is a water threat, strengthen your navy. That's why we have this blue ocean navy and increasing armor forces and coming up with new kinds of fighter jets to protect our air defense zone. In this way, every country's military used to spend billions of dollars to protect their country's sovereignty. Okay, so when these traditional threats to the humanity, especially to the country, is going on, then we come across another topic, what we call this as the non-traditional threat. So by linking the current COVID-19 challenge to the non-traditional threat, let us discuss this a bit first. Then we will be going to the nuclear challenge as a enduring traditional threat. Most of the countries, most of the majority of the population in the world are facing. So I think with this now just we gave a brief. Now make a heading, non-traditional threats. Traditional means just nobody discussed. Traditional means threats to the country's sovereignty. That's it. Non-traditional threats means Now, see, these are those threats, non-traditional threats. These are those threats that are impacting not only to the state, but also to the individual. These threats not only impacting directly to the state, but also to the individual. There are not many non-traditional threats. Non-traditional means what? These are the kind of threats state did not thought of. They will create a challenge to the state itself. So initially, have you thought like one day public health emergency, this is the right now, this corona, it will create such a huge challenge to the country, to the whole land order machinery of the state and to the people. If we really thought of this threat, we could have predicted this threat. We could have come up with a strong health infrastructure. We could have come up with effectively tackling this particular challenge by way of strengthening of our health infrastructure. But we thought of, okay, our health infrastructure is fine. We keep on coming up with reforms. But we never thought like today the COVID-19 will pose such a kind of huge challenge to the humanity. So with this reason, the offline classes are being conducted in an online manner. I hope you got to know what I'm trying to say. Cyber attacks, of course, cyber attacks comes under the non-traditional threats. So let us try to classify. Now let's make heading on one side traditional threats, on the other side non-traditional threats. Two-way classification. First, let's make this as heading. So traditional threats, then you can make two blocks. On one side traditional, on the other side non-traditional threats. Traditional threats directly to the state. Traditional threats directly to the state by impacting the sovereignty. Non-traditional threats not only to the state but also to the individual. First point. Second point, traditional threats, suppose for example, we will be coming to know who our enemies are. That's the reason we can predict. Suppose for example, if most of the countries will be facing threats by surroundings, especially along the border countries. So we can predict the enemy. That's why we can strengthen more of the either army, navy or air force. Simple example, why we have to beef up more number of security forces along the northwestern border and the northeastern border. So we know the point very clear. When it comes to India, the northwestern border, that means borders along Pakistan and borders along the Bangladesh, Myanmar and the China, there the threat perception is very much high. That's why we have to beef up the security forces there. We can predict it. So on the traditional side, you can write traditional, you can predict the threat. Whereas in the case of non-traditional, predicting the threat is very difficult. Because you cannot know like how the threat will come, in what way the impact will be. See, until the corona challenge came up, we never thought like, see, initially in the month of January, in the month of February, when we used to have offline classes, that time also we discussed about this corona challenge. But we never thought like it will pose such a kind of challenge. And with that reason, not only the state, but also the individuals will be impacted in such a way. So the non-traditional challenge is highly unpredictable. At the same time, it is everlasting. Next, traditional challenge. Traditional challenge, first point, state will be influenced. The impact is more on the state, whereas when it comes to the non-traditional, the impact is not only to the state but also to the individual. Those who are not able to understand, they can see this information later, because you can stream backward also later. Next, when it comes to traditional, you can have a specific strategy. When it comes to non-traditional, you cannot have one specific strategy. Second, the next point, traditional, specific strategy, non-traditional, you cannot come up with one specific strategy because the whole country will be affecting along with the individuals. So suppose, for example, say what is specific and why you have to hear in the non-traditional, you have to come up with the holistic. If you got to know that the challenge from the northwestern borders is high, you can have more number of forces there. You can come up with a specific strategy there. Whereas in the case of non-traditional, it will be impacting almost all the people. At the same time, you cannot come up with one specific challenge. You should continuously keep on change it. You should keep on coming with the new kind of methods to protect your people and the state. That's for non-traditional. Suppose, for example, take the case of cyber. Cyber challenge is one of the non-traditional challenge because you will not know from where the attack happens, how we have to protect ourselves from the within the cyberspace. Suppose right now, if you see, there is a new word that is coming up, infodemic. There is a new word in the corona times. The word is infodemic. Infodemic. That means information plus pandemic. If you combine portmanteau, it's a portmanteau of two words: information plus pandemic. So during the time of this pandemic, the kind of information that is being spread to the people. So sometimes this information is creating a fear to the people. Who is spreading this information? Very difficult to find out. Who is spreading this false information to the people? Suppose, for example, if you see some of the resident welfare associations, the way they are treating a specific community, the way they are coming up with their own dictats. Some of the one I just read in newspaper, one resident welfare association in Noida, they started boycotting all the what you call these fruit sellers, milkmen, and vegetable sellers, vegetable vendors. At the same time, they started passing their own orders. Like if you drink this, then you won't be affected with corona challenge. If you eat this, you won't be affected with corona challenge. And this information, this false information is being spread to different parts of the country. So how to control this? So this is what we call as infodemic. So during the time of the pandemic, the kind of information that is being spread by the people. So this kind of infodemic challenge, so how to tackle it? So this is one type of non-traditional challenge. So what we are trying to say here, non-traditional will be impacting not only to the state, but also to the individual. That's why this is highly complex and dynamic. So you can write on the non-traditional side as complex and dynamic. And next one is, when it comes to traditional challenge, you will be coming to know how, from where the attack is happening. That means origin of the attack. On the traditional side, you can write, you can find out the origin of the attack. Suppose, for example, if there is a cross-firing happening between the Indian forces and the other side, you will be easily coming to know from where the attackers are coming from. When the Mumbai blast took place, we got to know. When identifying okay, sorry for the disruption. So, am I clear now? Am I clear? Clear? All right. Okay, fine. So I stopped disabling the SIM, so that's why. Okay, all right. Fine. So Now we got some information about what is traditional, what is non-traditional. See, we'll conclude this topic, then we'll come to the next one. So, traditional challenge influencing the state, non-traditional challenge not only to the state but also to the individual. When it comes to COVID-19, this is what we call as the public health emergency we are facing right now. So, COVID-19 is not only posing challenges to the state administration, but also posing challenges to the individual. At the same time, finding a solution to the non-traditional challenge is very difficult. This is the point you can mention on the non-traditional side. Finding solution to the non-traditional side is very difficult comparing with the traditional side. That's why right now, if you see how to tackle the COVID challenge, we don't have any vaccine yet. So we are coming up with the preventive measures. See how many ways you have, how many kind of different ways you have to follow to tackle this particular challenge. So this is the kind of classification of threats. So initially we used to think of only the traditional side. Now we got to know that if you think of only the traditional threat and by neglecting the non-traditional threat, so then the country has to face lot many challenges. So that's why along with traditional threats, now we are also thinking of the non-traditional threats. So non-traditional means we just now mentioned. These are highly complex. You cannot come up with one specific solution. You should come up with a holistic solution for this. Holistic means solutions at the individual level, at the society, civil society level, and at the state level. Okay. Now come to the traditional threats. Now under the traditional threats, we will be classifying the threats. So if you see that, I think any questions with respect to traditional, non-traditional, you can raise some questions. Any questions? Okay, I can't repeat the whole information again, but for your sake, traditional, non-traditional, yes, corona is a non-traditional threat. See, not only corona, public health related threats, because non-traditional means it impacts not only to the state but also to the individual. This corona threat is definitely a non-traditional threat. At the same time, here we can't come in with one specific solution. Only the state alone cannot fight. Traditional challenge means what? The challenge coming along the borders. So the state alone can fight. Whereas in the case of non-traditional, the challenge is not only to the state but also to the individual. So in the case of corona, COVID-19, it is the non-traditional. There is no doubt. Yes, let's come to the next one. Now, if you see the traditional challenge in especially in terms of attacks, so we will be class what we call, when we see one particular attack as a major attack, when the country faces attacks from the WMDs. So here I'm typing here WMDs. What is a WMD? Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction. These weapons of mass destruction, you can classify them as like chemical weapons, biological weapons, radiological, nuclear. I'm repeating, weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, radioactive, and nuclear. So these are four types. So these four, what we call them as a weapons of mass destruction. So these are the four ways of attacking, and like four kind of weapons that we use, are some countries or some individuals will be using to attack another country. So these weapons will be used in their country's missile programs to attack another country. Suppose, for example, we have the intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and we also have the cruise missiles. So these intercontinental ballistic missiles, for example, one of such is that BrahMos, Agni. What these missiles can do? These missiles can even carry the nuclear payloads. The nuclear warheads also can be carried by these missiles. So what these nuclear warheads will do? They will be target specific. You can attack another country. So missiles are a means to carry these kind of weapons. It can be a chemical weapon, it can be a biological weapon, it can be a radiological weapon, and nuclear weapon. So recently, some of you, when it comes to biological weapon, some of the people mentioned like this corona. This corona is one kind of biological weapon used by China against the world. So there are rumors about it, but with respect to this particular information, whether it is really a bio weapon used by China against other countries, it is as of now a rumor. You can't completely say like, because we do not have any proven evidence to show like, yes, it's a biological weapon used by China. But mostly, previously we have seen one example, anthrax. Anthrax is one, that time it's around 2002, 2003, those times. So biological weapon means same like using of some pest, in fact, the pest that can clean off the whole crop of a particular country. Are you sending these kind of mutated viruses so that it will be having a huge impact on the country's public health? So this is what we call as the biological. And you know the chemical. So chemical means like using the chemicals and the gases. Suppose, for example, there is a gas called as sarin gas. Sarin gas. Recently, we had about this particular one. We had about that the Syrian forces, the Syrian government used this particular gas against its people to suppress the movement against the government. But though the Syrian government denied it, but the international community is still believing that this particular gas was used by the Syrian government against its people. So it's a very poisonous gas. If any individual inhales it, then there will be health challenges to the individuals, and it can also lead to fatality. Fatality means death of the individual. So chemical attacks means by using the chemical weapons, different kind of chemical weapons, one country will be attacking another. So we have seen one such attack during the time of the 1984 Iran-Iraq war. So the world community believed that Iraq used these chemical weapons against Iran. So with that, there is a huge loss of individual lives in Iran in the 1984 Iran-Iraq war. The recent example for this chemical attack is this using of the sarin gas against its own people by the Syrian government. The world community, especially the West, is believing that, but the Syrian government is not agreeing with what the West is saying about it. So with that, when it comes to this particular chemical weapon attacks, to stop it, we also have an organization. You can take down this point. This organization's name is OPCW, Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. So there is an organization to limit, ultimately to stop the chemical related attacks. So the name of the organization is OPCW, Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. So it follows a convention. There is a convention being followed by this particular organization, is that CWC, Chemical Weapons Convention. Chemical Weapons Convention. Under this convention, India is also one of the member of this convention. Chemical Weapons Convention, 2003. So, sarin gas, poisonous gas. Okay, so there is an organization and there is a convention. That's why this OPCW, because in 2012, when these kind of things happen, Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapon, it came up with some kind of measures. That's when 2013 it also got the Nobel Peace Prize. OPCW got Nobel Peace Prize in 2013 because of this. So these are the chemical attacks. We also discussed about the biological attacks. So radiological means simple. Using the radioactive materials, suppose cobalt 60, using of some of the phosphorus related, by using phosphorus, they will be creating a poisonous radioactive material. So using the polonium, what we call polonium attacks. So using of this uranium, these are all coming under the category of the radioactive attacks, radiological materials. Using the radiological materials, see mostly what these people will be doing, they want nobody should stay on this place forever. In this way, the radiological attacks will take place. For example, take the case of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, even in that place, even till today, with respect to specific area, nobody will be entering that place because of the presence of the radiation. So the radiation will be staying for years, and you all know because the half-life of these particular elements is very high. So that's why the radiation stays longer. Because radiation stays longer, this place will become like a no man's land. So this is what we call as the radiological attacks. And the last one is the nuclear attack. For the first time, the world has seen what exactly a nuclear weapon in that 1945, 6th of August and 9th of August, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Little man and fat boy. These are the two names given by the America to its nuclear weapons. First time the world community has seen the impact of the nuclear weapon. So after that, even till date, though the countries are coming up with the nuclear weapon, they are piling up of the nuclear stock. But there is, as of now, we haven't come up with we haven't seen, the world community as of now, fortunately, haven't seen another nuclear attack. But after this attack, and with increasing research, different countries started getting the nuclear weapons. And immediately, you know what happened after 1945? We entered into the new phase of world politics, especially in the name of what we call this in the name of Cold War. The world community got divided into two worlds, like the first world and the second world. On one side, we have the USA, on the other side, we have the USSR, present Russia. So these two countries started involving into the Cold War politics. In this Cold War politics, this nuclear weapon has become a big thing to be discussed. Both because the world community has seen the impact of the nuclear weapon. So to what extent the nuclear weapon can destroy the humanity. That's why the nuclear weapon is called as weapon of mass destruction. Nuclear weapons also radioactive weapons. But nuclear, to be specific, here we'll be using one specific radioactive material. Radioactive attacks means all the radioactive materials will be coming up. Nuclear means we'll be using a specific radioactive material, that is uranium. That's the only difference. Because this is the uranium is as a radioactive material we are using in the making of nuclear weapon. That's it. So if you see nuclear weapon as a weapon of mass destruction that the humanity experienced with the attacks of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, then with the starting of the Cold War, especially in the 1960s, what we call, if you read your NCRTs, there they will mention about the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis, it reached to such a situation that USA and USSR both were ready to attack each other with the nuclear weapons. USA, USSR, they both were ready to attack each other with the nuclear weapons. With that reason, they started sending their nuclear weapons to the strategic locations to attack each other. So there are people, they used to say that the 8 minutes destruction. Within 8 minutes, within just 8 minutes, both the countries will be destroying each other if one country starts attacking another. So in such a way, both the countries came up with their strategies to strengthen, like to protect their strategic interests. When this kind of thing happened, eventually the world community and these countries, every time these wars also won't last longer, right? There should be some kind of solution. You know what happened after the World War I? We have seen the League of Nations. After World War II, we have seen United Nations. But after that, now that most of the countries are independent, and these two countries also, US and USSR also, they thought like, okay, let's come to one kind of agreement. So after a lot many discussions, eventually in the year 1968, for the first time at least, they came up with some kind of agreement for the non-proliferation. So proliferation means strengthening the nuclear stockpile. So non-proliferation means stopping this kind of expansion of the nuclear stockpile. So for the first time in the year 1968, with the initiatives of these two countries, because these two are the major ambitioning countries, eventually 1968, we came up with one treaty, what we call even as of now also famously as the NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This is the kind of first some impactful treaty. Previously also we have some treaties, but the first impactful treaty for the nuclear non-proliferation is NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty 1968. So in this particular treaty, there will be mentioning of the three categories. How the nuclear technologies or the nuclear weapons, the spread of these weapons has to be stopped. So now you can make a three-way classification. One is nuclear non-proliferation. Second one is nuclear disarmament. Third one is peaceful use of nuclear technology or nuclear energy. So three categories: nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear disarmament, and the third one is nuclear peaceful use of the nuclear energy. Accordingly, if you take the case of the first one, nuclear non-proliferation. So nuclear non-proliferation means what? Stopping the spread of the nuclear technologies to the countries where they haven't have any nuclear technologies to make the nuclear weapon. That's why for the first time under the category of the nuclear non-proliferation, they came up with one particular group, what we call this group as the Nuclear Suppliers Group, NSG. Why this group has to come? Because of the tests performed by India in the year 1974. Nuclear weapon tests. So this is a nuclear non-proliferation group, the NSG, Nuclear Suppliers Group. Why the NSG has to come up? The NSG has to come up to stop spreading of, to stop exporting of these nuclear technologies to other countries, so that they can stop making of this weapon. That's why the NSG came. So we have four such export control regimes. These regimes are also called as nuclear non-proliferation regimes, also call them as what we call, I'm typing here, nuclear non-proliferation regimes. We also call them as export control regimes. These are 4 of them. There are 4 export control regimes. Some of you already know. One is NSG. Second one is Australian group. WASSENAAR, WASSENAAR Convention, and the 4th one is MTCR. MTCR. These are 4 export control regimes. They comes under the category of the nuclear non-proliferation. Because at the end of the day, today we have to discuss about CTBT. That's why I want to understand you people about these categories. So we have 3 categories: nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear disarmament, peaceful use of the nuclear energy. So in the first one, we have this, we discussed about these 4: NSG, Nuclear Suppliers Group. Second one is Australian Group. Third one is WASSENAAR Convention. And the 4th one is MTCR. MTCR full form, Missile Technology Control Regime. So I hope you understood this one. So in that, the first one, I won't be giving much details about that. I think some of you have already known about it. Even if not, you can go and search. Simply I'm giving just some few lines about it. NSG, Nuclear Suppliers Group. This group consisting as of now 44 members. They are the major suppliers of the nuclear raw material to other countries. So this particular group came into being to stop giving nuclear material to other countries for making of the nuclear weapon. That's why they will be coming up with restrictions. They say, like, until the country signs NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, we will not supply any of the nuclear material to that particular specific country. Because if you don't sign NPT, you may use this material, this nuclear raw material, for the making of a nuclear weapon. Because nuclear raw material can be used in 2 ways: for making of a nuclear weapon or nuclear peaceful use of nuclear energy, nuclear reactors. So if you sign NPT, there will be restrictions for making of the nuclear weapon, so that we can give you. So that's why came up a group called as NSG. Second one, we have Australian group. Australian group came in the year 1985. Why this group came? Because the 1984 Iran-Iraq war. So Australian group is for reducing spread of the chemical and biological weapons. This is the purpose of the Australian group. So second one, Australian group for the purpose of chemical and biological weapons. And the third, WASSENAAR Convention. WASSENAAR Convention is for the reducing dual-use goods, reducing spreading of the dual-use goods. Suppose, for example, the same nuclear material can be used for making a weapon or for nuclear reactor, for the nuclear energy. The same, this artificial intelligence technology can be used for a telemedicine, can also be used to make some dangerous weapons. So dual use means one good can be used for a good purpose or for the bad purpose. So WASSENAAR Convention, what it will be doing is, like, it will be prohibiting using by the end. It means I will be taking one particular raw material for one purpose, I will be using it for another purpose. That's why they say that when we are giving this particular good to you, you should use that only for that particular purpose, not for another purpose. So this kind of regulation, this kind of what we call these kind of things mentioned in the WASSENAAR Convention, that will be implementing in the name of prohibiting the are regulating the dual use goods. So this is about WASSENAAR Convention. The fourth one is MTCR, Missile Technology Control Regime. It came in the year 1996. Missile Technology Control Regime came in the year 1996. What it used to do is like it regulates the export of missile technologies from one country to another country. So if suppose India is having a BrahMos missile right now, India cannot export BrahMos missiles to whichever country it like, because if that is the case happens, then the country that is receiving this BrahMos missile might be using for a propaganda purpose or to create a threat to another country. So that's why when you are exporting your missiles to another country, there should be some kind of regulations. So these regulations are mentioned in a convention, what we call this as Missile Technology Control Regime 1996. Clear? These four are the export control regimes. Then we have the nuclear disarmament. See, export control regime, what is the difference between nuclear non-proliferation and the nuclear disarmament? The difference is nuclear non-proliferation is to stop spreading of the nuclear weapon technologies to the other non-nuclear weapon states. As of now, if you see, what are the countries or which countries as of now holding the nuclear weapons? 5 countries officially and 4 more countries unofficially. Because if you want to be declared as an official nuclear weapon state, then you have to sign the NPT. The countries which have signed the NPT, they will be declared as the official nuclear weapon holding state. As of now, these 5 countries, the UNSC members, though France did not sign NPT, but still being a member of the UNSC, France is the only specific country here. Only country without signing NPT declared officially as a nuclear weapon state. 5 countries, the UNSC members: USA, UK, France, Russia, China. These 5 are the officially nuclear weapon declared states, and 4 unofficial ones: North Korea, India, Pakistan, Israel. 4 countries. These 4 unofficially, what we call them as holding the nuclear weapons. So as of now, the nuclear non-proliferation means regulating the transferring of nuclear weapon making technologies to the non-nuclear weapon states. Nuclear disarmament means, under nuclear disarmament, the countries which are already having the nuclear stockpile, the countries which are already having the nuclear stockpile, they in the coming years has to reduce their stockpile. So here comes the nuclear disarmament. So that's why under nuclear disarmament, we will be discussing about certain treaties. So what are these? So the most influential one I'm writing. I'm not writing everything. So one is INF. INF 1987. Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. INF Treaty. What we call this as INF Treaty. And the second one is START 1, 1991. Second one, START. And the third one is the New START, the recent one. New START, it was signed during the time of Obama. New START. And the present one, what is there is the CTBT. CTBT 1996. So these are, as of now, the influential, though not fully, but to a maximum extent, influential nuclear disarmament treaties. Yes, in that the first one, INF, Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Reduction Treaty 1987. It was signed between these two countries, especially to be specific, America on one side, Russia on another side. These two countries, especially, they want to come up with what you call reducing the land based using a spreading of these intermediate range nuclear weapons. Intermediate range means short range up to 500 kilometers, long range, medium range up to 5,000 to 5,000 kilometers. Two ranges below 500, 1,000 to 5,000. So these two countries wants to reduce their nuclear stockpile and nuclear weapon making, so that because these are the two countries as of now holding the highest stockpile, more than 6,000 plus nuclear warheads as of now. If you take the case of India, we are hardly holding 250. As if you see the Indian stockpile, the official declaration is 250 around. Whereas in the case of USA and Russia, the official stock holding is more than 6,000 plus warheads, nuclear warheads. So these countries eventually wants to reduce their nuclear stockpile. You have to remember one point here. 1945, the first explosion of the nuclear weapon. 1968, signing of the NPT. 1987, this INF. Because 1960s, 1970s were the peak years of the Cold War. Cold War was at its peak in 1960s, 1970s. After that, they got to know that if the Cold War will be at peak, then we may go for the Third World War. So the world is not ready for the Third World War. Then they thought, like, let us come to a kind of treaty. Until we come up with this kind of treaty, then you also think like I will be attacking you. I also think like you will be attacking me. Then we both, by thinking like we both will be attacking each other, we will increase the nuclear stockpile. Meanwhile, some other countries also, by taking advantage of this, they also will come up with their own nuclear weapons. Eventually, the world community has to suffer. That's why they came up with the first this kind of influential treaty, though there are other treaties, is this INF. And after that, they signed another treaty, what we call this as START, S-T-A-R-T, START full form, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, 1991. Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, 1991. Signed between, again, USA, Russia. Then after that, when these two countries started thinking of like, okay, now onwards we won't be coming up with much of the nuclear stockpile, we will be maintaining a zero yield. Zero yield means what? We won't be coming up with a new technology. In yesterday's newspaper also they mentioned about this word, zero yield. Zero yield means we don't invest much of our research, we don't invest much of our energies in nuclear research so that it can be useful to make advanced nuclear weapons. So zero yield means what? Now onwards, there won't be any kind of progress in terms of research towards making of an advanced nuclear weapon. So the yield will be zero. So by 1990s, so one point you should understand here, why from 1990s onward these things started coming up. On one side, USSR collapsed, US became the unipolar, and USA doesn't want the other parts of the world, the other countries should get this technology. So with that reason, it signed these treaties. It knows that if we sign these treaties, then US is the only country that will be benefiting out of it, because it is the one holding the highest stockpile and the advanced technology in terms of the nuclear weapons. So it got the added advantages of it. So that's why initially it signed the INF, next it signed the START, and eventually they took it to the United Nations level. At the United Nations level, in the year 1996, they came up with, they proposed one treaty. What is this treaty? CTBT, Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty 1996. So it is banning all forms of nuclear weapon. So it says like that means no air, no water, anywhere, no land, anywhere the nuclear weapon making or nuclear weapon testing should happen. All forms of nuclear weapon testing should be banned. So that is the purpose of this treaty, what we call as CTBT, Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. So it came in the year 1996. So along with that, the CTBTO is an organization right now that will be implementing the treaty. So they came up with this treaty, and they allowed the member countries of the United Nations to sign this treaty. Most of the countries signed, but India did not sign, because 1996 the treaty came into being. 1998 we tested our nuclear weapon. In the year 1998, Operation Smiling Buddha, we tested our nuclear weapon. At the same time, we have another fear, like if we sign the CTBT, we may be coming under the restrictions of, because we will be losing our sovereign right to make the nuclear weapon. Who are the countries right now stressing to sign the CTBT? These Western countries. Even USA itself did not ratify the treaty. You know, the signing and ratification. Signing means government will go and sign. Ratification means the country's legislature. In the case of India Parliament, in the case of USA Congress, they have to approve it. Because USA did not ratify, China also did not ratify. Whereas in the case of India, we neither signed. If there is no sign, then there is no concept of ratification also. So now the question is, in yesterday's newspaper, they mentioned about like, now there will be revisions of CTBT. At the same time, now America is having a fear of, China and Russia right now may come up with more nuclear stockpile by doing some kind of weapon testing, and by coming up with a positive yield. Positive yield means what? Researching more on the nuclear weapon by coming up with advanced technologies. So now we should think of one question. Post 1991, after the collapse of the USSR, everybody is happy, especially the America. Why? It became the superpower, like unipolar world. It is the only boss of the world. So everybody started listening to it. Now, if you see, to America, these two competitors. One is the rising China, and the second one is the reviving Russia. Russia, under the leadership of the Putin, is reviving back. China, with a lot of ambitions, rising. So now these two countries, along with America, they are again coming up with this nuclear race, the nuclear weapon race. This is creating some kind of fear to the USA also. So till for almost more than 20-25 years, it maintained the supremacy over this. But now these countries again rising, especially China and Russia. So definitely these two countries will pose a kind of challenge to USA. So USA is not able to digest this. So it wants to come up with some kind of other restrictions, or else it wants to cancel the treaties. It wants to have its own. It is thinking like, why I should maintain the rules if others are not, if others are not following it. So in that way, right now some kind of discussions are going on. If you see, Trump already stopped implementation of this INF treaty in the last year itself. Now in 2021, the treaty that was revised, the new treaty that was signed by Obama administration, the New START. New START means New Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, signed by Obama. So this treaty also will be coming to an end in 2021. Trump administration even thinking of to stop or to revise this particular treaty or to stop implementing in the coming years. So in this situation, what we should think is like, what we should understand, these traditional attacks are the traditional threats. Traditional threats will be there. At the same time, nuclear weapon as a threat to the humanity, though in the last few years we did not discuss much, again it may come back. Again we will be discussing about it, because though how many weapons we are having, nuclear weapon still is one of the destructive weapon. That's why we use the word weapon of mass destruction. Because right now, in the last few years, we are under the unipolar world. The world is under the control of the USA to some extent indirectly. So we didn't thought much about whether really a nuclear weapon will create a challenge. But now China is rising, Russia is reviving back along with the USA. So now again the world is going to enter into a bipolar, tripolar and quadrupolar world. So we will be having multiple poles. So when there are multiple poles, there will be a competition. When there is a competition and the countries will start ambitioning themselves. China will say that, no, I want to have my control. America will say that, I want to control. Russia will say that, I want to control. So in this situation, now think of India. So if somebody says that there should be a complete nuclear disarmament, we should not hold nuclear weapons, this is the kind of point India is mentioning. See, why we are holding a nuclear weapon? If we do not hold nuclear weapon, nobody will listen to us. That's why we have a nuclear policy. What is a nuclear policy? No first use policy. We are holding nuclear weapons only for the strategic purpose, and we will be having a limited. That's what we said. We also told to the world that, see, we don't want you, like you people, 6,000 stockpile, 7,000 stockpile. We will be holding a limited stockpile. At the same time, this stockpile that we are holding, is not to attack any country first. It is only to attack a country if that country is trying to attack us. That's why we use the word no first use policy. India's nuclear policy doctrine, that's what we say. The India's nuclear policy doctrine 2003. The 2003 nuclear doctrine of India says we are holding a limited stockpile and no first use policy. But we will be holding the nuclear weapon. The reason, that's why we did not sign the CTBT also. Because if you sign the CTBT, you have to ban, and at the same time there will be restrictions on it. At the same time, we also did not sign the NPT. We neither signed NPT nor signed CTBT. The reason? Because these countries will come up with imposed restrictions on us. That's why India did not sign this treaty, and we have our own policy with respect to the nuclear weapons. So in conclusion, the bottom line is that nuclear weapon as a weapon of mass destruction will be with us. The only way is keep on coming up with new strategies to contain. Like suppose, for example, take the case of Iran. Iran is also ambitioning to come up with a nuclear weapon. Saudi Arabia is ambitioning to come up with a nuclear weapon. So if different countries of the world comes up with the nuclear weapons, it will be a dangerous situation. So that's why at least maintain some status quo, and these weapons should be taken care of in such a way that they should not fall into the hands of the anti-social elements. So by following some kind of measures, if they are with the countries like India, they are almost safe, because ours is a democratic country, and we won't create any challenge to another country, because we are facing challenge from another country. But there are countries, they are ambitioning just to attack another country. So if it is in the hands of India or some other big countries, it won't create much challenge. But if it goes into the hands of, say, the small countries, then it may pose a challenge to us. So in that way, nuclear weapon will be there, and we also will be keeping it. So in the coming years, still the challenge will be there. But the only thing is keep on coming up with new strategies to tackle it. So if you have any questions, then you can raise. Few questions I can answer. If everything is clear, then I can end the stream. I can take 2 or 3 questions if it is specific. Okay, all right, then I will be ending the stream. Tomorrow we will come up with another topic. Thank you.